Yeah, it's the off season though. We're college football guys first, and yeah, it kind of stinks. There's just nothing right now. The February signing period is not really a thing anymore. It's all early signing period, and I know Greg Sankey's talking about you know potentially moving the early signing period or doing some type of reform. That's something I've been very vocal about as well. So
Vocal in what way, Carter?
they need to get rid of the early signing period. And this is the number one take I have on any college football thing that I do that I get destroyed for because a lot of people say, well, the early signing period is good because you get all these kids on campus and you get them for spring football. And that may or may not be a good thing, just depending on the player. But what I can tell you is not a good thing is when coaches get fired and hired right at the beginning of December, and then in 10 days, you got to fill a class or get everybody back on board. Well, the school that loses the coach has a lot of work to do to hire somebody before the early signing period begins. So these schools that spend millions and millions of dollars, the most important person is your head coach. You have to do these 5 to 10 day head coaching searches, and there's just so much behind the scenes from personnel people that I've spoken to at the college level that turns that beginning of December into pure chaos. And it's unfair to not only, the coaches, but it's unfair to the players, right? If you're committed to a school for as long as you've been committed to them and your coach decides to go elsewhere, or they get fired or whatever the case may be, you've got to scramble really quickly to make a choice. Hey, am I sticking with the school? Am I following the coach? It's a mess. So I miss the February signing period where, it's after the national championship game. We don't have situations where coaches have to bolt from their current school to another school. I just think the early signing period is not necessarily a disaster. I just don't think it's good. And I think there are ways to work around it.
So everything that you just said makes total sense, and I'm even going to add some to it. And
Yeah.
you kind of alluded to this, that I've heard this from coaches, both assistant coaches and head coaches. December is beyond ridiculous. They are slammed. So your team plays or doesn't play in a conference championship game the first weekend of December. Regardless, you're preparing a team for a bowl game. So we've got 40 some bowl games. We've got 2/3 to 3/5 of college football. Most of college football is preparing for a bowl game. So you gotta, and then we've got early enrollees who are now eligible to practice. They are, many of them are able. So you're trying to onboard 8 or 10 players, get them set with the college life, with acclimating them to the team. So you're doing all this that is still within the season, and then you're trying to hustle toward that, what is roughly December 15th deadline, to get these guys signed. And then you bring up the whole issue of you lose a head coach, and that new coach gets hired within the first 5 days, which is an enormous process unto itself. To
Right.
go out and get a major college football coach, that's that's an enormous decision.
Yeah.
And once you get him in play, he's like, take Dan Lanning. He's ingrained in the Southeast. That's what, and then all of a sudden he's in Eugene, Oregon. He's trying to coach a defense for a national championship run and recruit in a completely different part of the country,
Right.
and trying to pull together. And what is recruiting? Recruiting is about building relationships. And you got a new coach who's trying to maintain a class of 22 athletes. And he may have had connections with a handful of those 22 or 24 players, but most of them just trying to say, hey, this is why you should still come to Oregon or come to wherever. It's a daunting task.
It's brutal. And you saw some bowl games turn out the way that it turned out because, like, let's take Florida, for instance. Some random bowl in Vegas versus Oregon State means nothing to your future. And you had opt outs, you had all of that, and they were the worst team this bowl cycle. And Baylor, same thing happened. Should Dave Aranda be more focused on the bowl game, or should he be more focused on the recruiting class? I think most Baylor fans would say the recruiting class for next year for sure. So it's a mess, and I really do hate it because in the middle of it, you got all these opt outs, you got so many things happening. I don't know what the best case scenario would be for everyone involved. I don't know if you move the early signing period earlier or whatever, but like you said, December is just a mess, right? And I just wish we could have a season where we don't have to worry about recruiting. And then, February used to just be this huge recruiting month, and we don't have this dead cycle. I mean, I know the portal is still lit for grad transfer guys, but still, it's a very crazy process. But yeah, thanks for letting me, vent on that. But
I'm
yeah,
going to vent some more, Carter, because what we didn't
yeah,
bring up and throw into all that mix is what you just mentioned, the transfer portal.
right,
So we went to an early signing period. I believe it was 5 years ago. I believe it was 2018. I might be off by a year, but 2018, we didn't have this transfer portal humming. So now we've also got the December transfer portal. So these coaches have to try to retain their own roster in addition to going out scouting, figuring out, okay, who do we want in the transfer portal, in addition to recruiting, preparing for a bowl game or a playoff. Yeah, it's just
it's
way
a,
too much.
yeah, it's a mess. And I think the biggest thing for me, and this comes from an LSU perspective as well, but LSU, for as many transfers as they lost, they didn't lose anyone that was really a big time projected starter for them. Jack Besh was a really good player, but he was a backup. Demario Tolan was a projected starter, but LSU has done a really good job of getting not only guys transferring in, but guys who have played a lot, who have been all conference performers in their previous conference, right? So Omar Spates is probably the most accomplished transfer that they brought in. He was a multiple year starter at Oregon State. And then obviously Denver Harris, who I think is going to be really good, was all freshman at Texas A&M. So they've gotten some guys that are proven performers. What I think's happened to a lot of these college schools is they lose these guys that have been 3 and 4 year starters who have a great amount of fans at their current school, and they still pack their bags. No coach was fired, nothing. They just want to go somewhere else and enjoy their final year of eligibility. And, it kind of goes into the early period as well. You as a coach, you have no idea if this kid is really wanting to transfer. You have no idea if this kid, I mean, he's starting, right? He's starting. He's been a really good player for you. He likes everything, but he wants to go try something else. And LSU has been one of the schools that has gotten the better end of that, getting proven guys from other conferences. Jarek Bernard Converse a year before was such a huge difference maker. And this was a multiple year starter, 5th-year player coming in. And they're getting the same thing with Omar Spates this year.
Yeah, Spates is a tackling machine. He's racked up over 300 tackles in his career at Oregon State. Um, Carter, when you assess the landscape of LSU post early entry into the NFL draft, which had to be announced about a week ago, uh, how did all of that land? Did that land about where you expected in regards to who declared, who's coming back, or did you have some surprises? And who was really key for you in all of that?
Yeah, so obviously we had the very bizarre decision by Kayshawn to announce he's coming back just for, him to go to the NFL. That's what was expected the entire time. It was expected the same for Jaquelin Roy and BJ Ojolari. So, those were, 3 huge ones that decided to go into the draft early. Jay Ward could have come back as well, but he also decided to go. So Gardner was someone else that was also an early intro after a really good year at corner. So yeah, there was a lot of guys that were really good football players for LSU that decided to go. But because of the portal, they've been able to address some of those needs. I think the biggest question for me, Mark, is LSU's done a really good job of bringing in a ton of transfer portal defensive linemen. And that is going to make the defensive line fine. They may not be as good as they were last year, but more than likely they are going to be very good there. Where it's going to get very interesting for LSU is the jack outside linebacker position, the standing outside linebacker who plays the edge, right? So You think Will Anderson, you think BJ Ojolari. Ojolari has done this role really well for LSU over the past couple or this season in Matt House's system. So they're bringing in Braden Swinson from Oregon, who was a backup at the Jack at Oregon. They bring in Ovia Gufo, who played for Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, comes over from Texas. Will either one of those seasoned veterans be able to play that spot? Or could it be a Deshaun Womack, who's a five-star recruit, who's coming in, kind of a tweener? It's going to be interesting where LSU actually wants to play him next year, but he is very, very, very talented. So I think that for right now is going to be a massive question mark for LSU and how Matt House is going to want to call his defenses.
Now, jumping back to the recruiting discussion, and I'm going to balance out the argument just slightly, even though I think we're both on the same side and it's weighted completely toward getting back to a February signing
Right.
period. Uh, Based on what I understand of what created this situation and kind of was the impetus of getting this decision in place was the feedback from the student athletes who said, we commit early. We've committed throughout the year. We're ready to go. We're tired of coaches that we've not committed to contacting us, and we just want to get this done and
Right.
get this out of the way. And that's what was again the impetus for this. And right out of the gate, about 85% signed in the early signing period, and now it just keeps going up and up and up. I checked the top 100 of the 247 Sports rankings, and we've only got 4 players out of the top 100, so 96% of them are locked and loaded, and just 4 athletes hanging out there. So I'll say this, Carter, is there anybody out there that could possibly make their way to LSU that's still out there, considering there's probably 15 in the top 300 that still have yet to sign?
Yeah, if I get another message about Nicholas Harbor, I'll go
Oh, well,
crazy.
yeah, he would be the guy that
But
everybody wants. Yeah.
yeah, I think as far as like five-star, can't miss, this guy's a transcendent level recruit. That's the one guy that was always connected to LSU. He had a scheduled visit so many separate times. It just never worked itself out. And I get it. This guy is a amazing track athlete. So it's tough to get him, on visits when, his track schedule's so busy. But LSU could never really get him on campus. So as of right now, Mark, I don't really see any big time difference making high school blue chip prospect signing with LSU. Now, do I think they're still going to be active in the portal? Yes, they're still going to be very active in the transfer portal. And I believe LSU will try and get some other pieces there. But as of right now, as far as high school recruiting, I might be totally whiffing on somebody here. There might be somebody out there. So someone in the comment section, let me know. But as of right now, there's just no one off the top of my head that I think will sign with LSU up to this point.
We mentioned Brian Kelly. From what I understand, he's got like an extra million lying around here. Yeah, that's just an accounting thing. I don't think that's even worth talking about. Yeah, they dropped an extra million in the account, and obviously the accountants will get that straightened out and so forth. It's not like Brian Kelly's trying to get $1 million extra out of LSU.